This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Well, this is not the podcast everybody expected Doc and Jock to record this week, because we're at episode 599, and it's going to be more of a somber kind of podcast because the Detroit Lions season is over. Shockingly, I think Adam and I are going to have a wide range of emotions going from sadness to anger to frustration to shock to just bewilderment that the Detroit Lions 2024 season is over. I'm sitting here, guys, honestly, a little bit conflicted because obviously Adam and I both have some rooting interest for the Lions. There's some personal reasons as well that make it beneficial for both of us. And now it just abruptly comes to an end. And it's not like the Lions brought their A game and the Commanders were just a juggernaut. It's one of those deals where the Detroit Lions kicked themselves right in the ass, shot themselves in the foot, and it's just disappointing. All across the board, the stuff that we're going to talk about. Coaches leaving. Are there distractions? What the hell happened? Your quarterback that you paid north of $48-49 million to shit the bed. It was devastating. And I just want to take you guys, before I get Adam's reaction, you know it's going to be special. I was calm throughout. It was weird. I knew the idea of potentially a Lions playoff loss was there. But you looked at it and you said, given the fact the Lions could play well, if they clicked on all cylinders, and Dan Campbell said it, that if they played their B minus game, there was a chance the game could be competitive. But they brought their D minus execution, D minus game plan. It was horrible. So as the game commenced, the first sign was the fumble. That third down fumble, you're like, uh-oh, there's the potential bad Jared Goff is here. And then Mike Sanderstrill did his job. He executed like he always does. 'Cause isn't it funny? Big-time players that have a history of making big-time plays in big-time games tend to do it at the pros. What do you know? And he did it to State, he did it to the college football world, and he did it to the Lions. So it was shocking. As I sat there watching it, I mean, it's crazy to say, you know, I've gotten to the point now where I'm mostly emotionally detached during the games. I don't get riled up. But there were some times you're like, okay, you know, you just were disappointed that Goff threw a pick or Jamison Williams is running with the ball, then decides to throw it. You're like, what the F is going on? And I sat there in stunned silence. But the emotional reaction that I had, cuz, was numb. You know why? Because we've seen that shit for many times. That was just episode 5,000 of a bad Lions loss that you and I have seen throughout 599 episodes. We talked about 100 of those losses the exact same way. Big expectations. They lost. They play bad. Another team that many people think you're better than comes to your house and takes what you want. And so I sat there in the locker room the day after, just kind of like, I've seen that shit before. And it's hard to get riled up about it. There are things to get riled up about, for sure, and we'll talk about it. But I'm going to give you the floor because to me, it was disappointing and sad because we've seen it that way before. You didn't play your best game. That's what's the most frustrating part as I sit here talking to you, knowing that they collectively, top to bottom, coaching, the players, the execution, the best players not playing to their best capabilities. The opponents did. Jaden Daniels, De'Ami Brown, Scary Terry McLaurin, Zach Ertz, they played better. Luvu delivered the violent hit that knocked out basically Jared Goff. I mean, he was playing, but he was rattled. He got his bell rung. So in essence, they just flipped the script on the Detroit Lions, and it's over. Like, I clearly was excited to plan episode 600 around the Super Bowl or around the NFC Championship. But cuz it didn't happen. The Detroit Lions shockingly lose 45-31. How did you watch that game? What was your reaction to it? And how are you feeling about it a couple days later? Because to me, it's just just really sad.
I'm still emotionally broken. I watched the game at home with the wife and the baby, and I'll be honest with you. Looking back on that game, I knew we were in trouble after that first offensive series.
Yeah.
They go 3 and out, and I was like, oh, man. I was like, Washington isn't anything to mess with. And it kind of felt like from that moment on, the Detroit Lions were on ice skates, and they were trying to figure stuff out. Like, I feel like they came into this game maybe believing a little bit too much of their own hype. Maybe the week off made them a little bit rusty. Maybe, I don't know, could have been 1,001 things. But the moment that they went 3 and out, I was like, okay, this is going to be a slugfest. This is going to be a grudge match. Detroit's going to have to dig down deep, and they're going to have to prove that they've got that grit that they always talk about, that they're willing to drag you into the deep end and do whatever Dan Campbell said that they were going to do to you. And to be honest with you, I didn't have that confidence. I didn't have that feeling. And this is at the very beginning of the game. So when the game starts to tilt and the game starts to slide, I'm sitting there dejected. I'm sitting there upset. I'm sitting there frustrated. Next thing you know, the Lions are trailing. Next thing you know, Jared Goff is spilling the pill like Michael J. Fox and his Parkinson's has kicked into overdrive, and he's trying to open up a bottle of his medication, and it's now all over the floor. And I am just in that stage where I used to go when Matt Patricia was the head coach, when Jim Caldwell was the head coach, when Wayne Fontes was the head coach. I go back to that. Like that's the default mechanism, right? That is the shell-shocked version of Adam. That is the version of Adam that deals with Lions losses this way. It sucks on a Sunday. It then takes Adam until probably Thursday to process that entire loss and to get over it, just to get himself hyped up by Friday so he can relive it all again on Sunday. And that was where I went. And that is still where I'm at. I'm still processing this loss. I'm still trying to connect X's and O's and trying to figure out what could have went different, what could have been better. And I can't put it all together. I'm just not sure what happened. I'm not sure what took place. And when you start to kind of work through your grief and you start to work through these problems that you have with this ball game, you're trying to figure out people to blame. You're trying to look at whose fault is it that we're in this situation? Why are we here? How did this happen? You were the number 1 seed. You were arguably the best team in football, even with all of the players that you lost. You were the best team in football. You were better than the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't care what the records say. The referees have helped the Kansas City Chiefs get to where the Kansas City Chiefs are. You went out there and you actually played these games and you won games and you were 15-2. You were the best team in the NFC. It was your right to go and play for a Super Bowl. And yet you get popped in your very first game in the playoffs, and you get popped by a rookie. You get popped by Dan Quinn, a head coach who is now on his second team after having to go to Jerry's World and do some stuff for the Cowboys to be a defensive coordinator. You get popped by these guys. So when I look at this, and there's the frustration and you're upset. And look, I had a long conversation with my dad. I love talking to my dad, especially after Lions losses, because my dad is that guy who's like, I'm Lions free. I hate the Lions, but when Lions are winning, he's all about the Lions. And he is your typical fan. He's your typical guy that you hear call sports talk radio and that you yell at the radio about, right? He is the guy that basically all of us are. Everybody who's listening to this, you are or you know this guy. He is just your typical Detroit Lions fan who is upset and wants to blame Jared Goff. It's all his fault. Wants to blame this person, blame that person. So I'm like, okay, let's go down this trail. Let's look at all of this, right? And I'm like, who do we blame for this loss? Why did we lose this game? And honestly, man, when I look at it, there's so many people who I think have a part and have a role in what took place. This is very much a team game. Penny Sewell came out and was like, man, this is a team game. You win as a team, you lose as a team. You can't blame it all on one guy. Look, Jared Goff having a bad game at the worst possible time does not help. Does not help at all, right? Jared Goff turned the ball over, 3 times? A fumble, 2 interceptions? Not helping the cause, okay? He picked the absolute worst time to have his worst game of the season, all right? He has to take a large piece of the blame. because he is a guy who's out there playing. All eyes are on him, and he could have did something to help this team. Sticking with the offense, you could look at Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson having your speedy wide receiver throw a football. He throws it like a baseball at one of the most pivotal moments of the game. The game is now back within reach, and you want to run this silly trick play where you're putting the ball game in your wide receiver's hands, and he chucks the ball down the field to the wrong colored jersey. Ben Johnson, what are you doing? I love your trick plays, and I'm not here to sit there and say, look, I love them when they work and I hate them when they don't work. No. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying at that time, I don't understand what you're thinking. I don't understand why you would do that. If you're trying to surprise somebody, you're trying to catch somebody off guard, maybe. But it is way too important of a game, and you had clawed your way back to make this game somewhat competitive, because this game was far and away not competitive for a large part of it because Washington was whipping your ass up and down the field. So to then turn the ball over to your wide receiver and try to run this magical trick play, I just didn't get it. I didn't understand it. And I'm like, Ben Johnson, what are you doing? Only to then look at the defensive side of the ball. And look, the injury to Amik Robinson, I think dramatically changed the game plan. That is a guy who I hope they can bring back next year, because he played his ass off, and I think he showed you something. This was a guy who was really and truly a bit player for the Raiders. He came in here, and he showed his worth. This is a guy who can start at cornerback, and he can make wide receivers pay the price. I think him getting hurt early kind of sent Aaron Glenn into a bit of a tailspin. He did a poor job of adjusting. And when you're getting eaten alive, sending blitz packages regularly, trying to get to Jaden Daniels, who is just sitting there licking his lips and feasting on you for the entire first half, to only come back in the second half and try to dial him up even more aggressively, I don't understand what you're doing. I don't know what you're thinking. I'm not seeing the same thing you're seeing. I have no clue why you would do that. And that to me was incredibly frustrating, because your defense couldn't stop them and couldn't get Washington off of the field. If your defense could have came up with one stop, two stops, any stops, you came away with no stops, it could have changed this game. You could have gotten the ball to the offense, who then could have went back to running the ball because you ran the ball really, really well. Your pass game was kind of the shits. You ran the ball really, really well. Again, a Ben Johnson problem. But your defensive coordinator not making the proper adjustments, especially going in at halftime, where his signature is making second half adjustments. They were losing at halftime, and I had a buddy who was basically on the crisis hotline, ready to slit his wrist, and I'm like, dude, it's gonna be okay. At halftime, this team makes adjustments. Aaron Glenn makes adjustments. You're going to be okay. It's gonna be all right. It'll be fine. Now, yeah, I was numb, and I was giving him words of advice and encouragement. And look, I believe that they were going to make those adjustments. I thought that they would, until they came out and they didn't. And they looked like absolute buffoons. And then you can look at your head coach, Dan Campbell. Look, Dan Campbell goes up to the podium, cries a lot. He's emotional. Fine, whatever. Fans love it. It's cool. Whatever. Here's the deal. When it's all said and done, Dan Campbell has the headset. Dan Campbell can tell Ben Johnson, we're not having J-Mo throw that football. Dan Campbell can get in Aaron Glenn's face and say, figure this out. Your blitz packages are shit and they're not working. He can grab Jared Goff and say, look, man, you need to hold on to the football and you got to stop turning it over. Get your head out of your ass. Also, Dan Campbell is the guy who, when you have 12 guys on the field because you can't count to 11 and it's 4th and 2 in a critical spot in the game, he is the guy who can call a timeout. Instead, you cut to Calvin Shepard sitting there trying to wave guys off the field. He probably should have screamed for a timeout. You had Tom Brady, who was completely in over his head in this game. There were points in this game where Tom Brady had no idea who was even on the field. There was a point where he was like, Zach Ertz isn't on the field right now. And then you had Kevin Burkhardt circle Zach Ertz and say, nope, he's right here. And Zach Ertz scores the touchdown. And Tom Brady's like, oh, yep, that was a good play to Zach Ertz. Tom Brady, who was completely disengaged from this game, is like, you've got 12 guys on the field. You need to call a timeout. You need to call it. He did it for 20 seconds. Yet your head coach couldn't call the timeout to help put your defense in a spot where they could have gotten a big stop on a 4th and 2 and got you the ball back. Instead, they go and they score a touchdown. And basically at that point, the game was completely over. You had no shot at getting back in this game, and it was donezo. Donezo. So when you spin the wheel of blame, there's a lot to go around. There's a ton of people who need to wear this loss and need to be embarrassed because of this game. On top of it, I think Dan Campbell really needs to take a good look in the mirror, because I think this team did read some of the press clippings, did read a little bit of the hype, and maybe did start to believe in the smell of their own farts and thought that their shit didn't stink. I think this team came in a little bit overconfident. I think you ran up against a team with a rookie quarterback who's going to be damn good. And I'm not looking to take anything away from Washington. That team is going to be scary good. If I am the Eagles, if I am the Giants, if I am Dallas, I am nervous because now I feel like there is a new king of that division, and it is Washington, and it is led by Jaden Daniels. He is going to be so good. He's going to be that quarterback who is going to be pushing to be in that elite spot going forward. I think this team believed their own hype, ran into a team that had a bigger chip on their shoulder because they seen all the hype that the Lions were getting, and they came in and they punched you in the mouth. And you weren't expecting to get hit that hard. Next thing you know, you're slammed through a table and you shit on yourself. And it was at that point, it was too late for you to make any adjustments. And again, I think a lot of that falls on Dan Campbell getting these guys' minds right. And that was something that we could never say about Dan Campbell. These guys always came in with that chip on the shoulder, always came in with that underdog role. You went up against a bigger underdog on this day and you lost, and they put it in your face. Who do you blame for this loss? Because like I said, the wheel is massive. There are lots and lots of people. I just went through it. I basically blame the entire team.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many people that I find fault with for this loss. Who do you think I guess the big and burden to blame, or who all do you blame for this loss?
Yeah, look, and part of the reason why I was numb was my season prediction was Super Bowl loss. So there is a silver lining in that we don't have to witness the Lions go through the press and have all the hype for 2 weeks only to get squashed by the Bills or the Chiefs. Because here's the deal, and it's unfortunate. And here's, I think, the sentinel moment. Like, the Lions were hanging on by a thread with everything going on. There were so many injuries. Not an excuse, because every reason that you laid out was factual, was honest and real. Everybody had a hand in it. But I think what led to the boat collapsing, I think the Lions were able to patch up a lot of the holes, but 50 holes opened up when Amik Robertson went down. I think that was that was it. That was sentinel. That was important. That was an emotional leader. You're just another individual laying on the ground with a broken arm. And so you recognize, look, you got one cornerback and your defense is just going to have a hard time. But it's the NFL. And in the end, everybody has a hand in it. Like you said, the coaches, the players. But one of the biggest reasons is Jared Goff did not match the level of execution that Jaden Daniels did. And here's the deal. It's not fair for a quarterback to get all the blame. But unfortunately, when you're making north of $48 million and you're throwing interceptions, you're putting the football on the ground, you're part of the reason the defense is in a bad spot. Jared Goff's to blame. Jared Goff is the biggest factor why the success of the Commanders was expedited and they got more opportunities. Jared Goff was a big reason why the Commanders got confidence. They got the football. 3rd and 1, you have a situation in which you get hit. You can't drop the football. You cannot lose the turnover battle 5-0. It's shocking. It's deplorable. It's embarrassing. And there's a lot of reasons probably why. And I do think that everybody's looking for that smoking gun. But everything that you said was absolutely factual. It was a lot of things. And I think part of it, too, was the fact that there was noise surrounding the coaches, Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, leaving. Players hear that. They know that. They understand that, okay, this is do or die. But there should have been, I thought, a resulting sense of urgency that would have made them play desperate. But another factor, too, is I know we're a Lions podcast, but as time passes, as the more hours pass, simply put, Jaden Daniels played better than Jared Goff. And 2, Dan Quinn is a bigger wizard at the NFL game than Dan Campbell is. And it's not bad to say Dan Quinn's a wizard. Dan Quinn was up in the Super Bowl 28-3, but he went up against the GOAT in Tom Brady. He had his team ready to win a Super Bowl. Defense, wins championships. And that's what we've always said is you don't have to have the best defense. Look, his defense came in ranked 30th against the run, and they faced Jahmyr Gibbs, and they gave up a shit ton of points. But they have a quarterback. They have a great coaching staff. Dan Quinn can have a big ego. Could have brought his friend. Nope, he brings in Cliff Kingsbury, NFL caliber coach. And he says, all right, you got your side, I got my side. His team was a little bit more rowdy. And also, too, the psychological factors play into it. They heard the clippings. You guys don't belong, 10-point underdogs. They were a little bit more tested, having gone to Tampa Bay and won. They had the confidence. They had the better players. Dan Quinn's a big factor. That's why I had said on a lot of podcasts Washington was scary. I wanted them because the Lions, again, if they executed and played well, I thought the Lions could win the game. But Dan Quinn is a fine football coach. And at the level of experience that he's got a lot to prove too. He was passed over for Dallas, literally. And the opportunity presented itself to go to Washington to resurrect the team. And that's where it's unfortunate because you don't want the lasting legacy now of the conversation you and I are going to have right now to be about, can Jared Goff help you win a Super Bowl? The doubts have now risen again. It's fair to say it's a fair conversation. We cannot put Jared Goff on a pedestal because that's there. And so now moving forward, we will always panic. I will always panic when Jared Goff plays a playoff game. You got to ask yourself, you cannot assume that Jared Goff is going to be the clean Jared Goff from the playoffs. It's too much of a swing. It's too volatile. Last year he was clean. They won. This year it was not clean. It was error-filled. It was just that fine line of overthrowing. I mean, the pass, the more I think about it, because now the mental picture is coming in my head, he not only because he missed 17 on that high throw by like 2 yards over his head. Like, that is something. But why did he miss him? Why? Because Dan Quinn's an OG. He rocked Jared Goff. He's like Louvu. I think Louvu would have got, of course, this is like not official, but Louvu got the notion to, hey, go rock Jared Goff. Helmet to helmet, he rocked Jared Goff. If he would have got a penalty, his coaching staff would have been like, good job. Like, the mission was any defensive coordinator, defensive mind, worth a damn, knows this. You rock Jared Goff. Happy feet, he's gonna wilt. It's what the Bills did, what the Bucs did, what the Texans did. It's there. And see, our fan base is a little bit simple at times where they go, well, Jared Goff played well against the Bears. Well, yeah, no shit, the Bears are struggling. No shit, they're going to win 15 games in the regular season. Jared Goff is not a bum. What we want him to do is in the biggest games not to ever do what he just did on tape. But at the same time, it's also a big factor that Dan Quinn said, yeah, I know what we need to do to fuck up Jared Goff. It's to fucking pressure the shit out of him, scare the shit out of him, and then when you get a chance, you blast him in the head. That's what they did. They fucked up Jared Goff, and they made Jared Goff look like an amateur out there. And so it's a lot of combination. There's no one thing, but everything that you said is all true. Coaching, the players, the noise, it all played a factor into the formula of losing. But the question's there. Jared Goff is a guy that will tease you. He's a guy that has the skills, very much an emotional leader, very much a talented quarterback. But, I mean, can Brad Holmes build a 22-man roster all healthy at the same time so that Jared Goff can succeed? It's tough, man. It's tough. But I do think Goff can get one. But I think the part that, and I can say it honestly, is, look, I'm selfish. I want Goff to be the reason they win. I want it always. I want the best of the best of the best. So I want the best quarterback in the world, where the whole world could be falling apart like it seemingly does to the Chiefs, and they still win. Why? Because Mahomes is a unicorn. Goff is not a unicorn. He's a factory worker. And in a sense, you can always win with a factory worker, but it's going to be once. And then you're probably not going to have a dynasty with Jared Goff. It's just not going to happen. Things are going to happen. Defenses are great. He may have another meltdown. So you can win one with Jared Goff. I don't doubt that. But it's going to take a lot of special work. The doubts are creeping in. And in the end, because we have to sit here and own it, that Jaden Daniels, a quarterback who was drafted, a rookie who we all said maybe the Lions should have went that route. And there'll be plenty of time to dissect it this offseason. Hey, maybe Goff should have been the bridge quarterback. Maybe you shouldn't have went with Hendon Hooker and developed him for 2 years. Maybe you should have went in that direction where this year you could have had a Jaden Daniels leading your team. We'll have all those kind of talks. But cuz, where are you at with Jared Goff? Can you win with him? Are you hopping off the bandwagon? At least probably now, the Jared Goff chants in the grocery store are going to stop.
I think they'll be much quieter, that's for sure.
For sure.
This is the way I look at it, right? The reason you were 15-2 and the reason you got to where you got, and this was the one thing that really irked me about the conversation with my dad and why I couldn't wait to get off the phone with him. And if I had a radio station, I probably would have hung up on his ass. Is he got you to 15-2. Did he have some clunkers along the way? Yeah, that game in Houston sticks out. You know, he threw 5 interceptions in that game. But you go back and you look, this is also the same guy who threw 4 touchdowns, and for what I think was an 8-week, maybe a 10-week stretch, the guy threw 1 interception. So, look, I think Jared Goff is a very good quarterback. I think Jared Goff is a guy you can win with. No, he is not an elite quarterback. He is not in that upper tier. I think that upper tier, for me, consists of 2, maybe 3 guys. It's Josh Allen. Unfortunately, it's Patrick Mahomes. And then I'm willing to put Joe Burrow in there. I'll listen to an argument if you don't feel like Joe Burrow belongs in there, but I would put Joe Burrow in there. I think Jared Goff is somewhere in that next grouping of guys. He's in there with guys like, and look, you can get as mad at me as you want. I think he's in there with guys like Lamar Jackson. Okay? Yeah, what does Lamar do that is different than Jared Goff? He can run. Yeah, Jared Goff's not the most mobile guy. And that, I think, was the one thing that my dad really honed in on, was Jared Goff is not a mobile quarterback. Yeah, okay, cool. In other news, water is wet, and usually the sky is blue when the sun is out. I don't know what you want me to tell you. This is what he is. This is the type of quarterback he is. The guy is a pocket passer, and you need to be able to protect him, which I think is going to lead to the other thing that we're going to talk about here, things that need to get fixed. I think Jared Goff is a guy who is in that next group. He is a top 10 quarterback. He is arguably a top 7, maybe 6 quarterback in this league. I really feel like these conversations with Jared Goff go right back to the conversations we had about Matt Stafford. You can't win with Stafford. You can't do anything with Stafford. Stafford goes to L.A., and next thing you know, Stafford wins a Super Bowl, and everybody looks at Matt Stafford different. Is Matt Stafford so different on L.A. than he was here in Detroit? The answer is no. He just has a few more weapons. He's got an organization that was built a little bit better. Now, look, L.A. felt like they couldn't win and get over the hump with Jared Goff. Okay, cool. That is Les Snead's opinion, and that is one organization's opinion on Jared Goff. I personally feel like you can build a winner around Jared Goff, and Jared Goff can win you a football game. Now, all that being said, I think Jared Goff needs to go back and watch this game and really be critical of himself and be like, look, when I've got the ball in this spot, I need to just eat it, or I need to turn it over, or I need to throw it out of bounds. I need to not turn it over. I think he needs to have a hard look at that. All that being said, I think he's your guy. On top of that, you just laced him with a contract. He isn't going anywhere. You know, you and I listen to a lot of sports talk radio because we're absolute nuts. We love sports. We love sports talk. That's why we started this podcast, 10, 11 years ago. That's why we've been doing this. We're on almost episode 600. Episode 600 was supposed to be a party. Instead, we're doing Heartbreak and Anger, and here we are. But here's the deal. You listen to people call in, and they're like, you need to go draft a quarterback. Hey, numpties. You don't need to necessarily go draft a quarterback. I was at bowling last night, and I had guys on my team be like, we need to draft a quarterback. We need to draft a quarterback. You laced Jared Goff with a contract. He's your QB for like the next 4 years. What you really need to do is you need to address your offensive and your defensive lines is what you really need to do, and possibly add another piece or two in that secondary. That's what you really need to do. Yes, Jared Goff turning the ball over as much as he did in this football game, not good. Definitely not good, right? But look at the season as a whole. This is a guy who at certain times carried you for large portions of the season. When things were going a little bit funky and you had lost all those guys on your defense, he was the guy who was going out there and he was lighting up the scoreboard, helping you win games 42 to 30, whatever. he was that guy. He's the same guy. He just happened to pick a bad day to have a bad day, and that's what that is. If you really don't think Jared Goff is the guy, I don't know what you want to do, because you have too much money invested in him. And if you're going to draft a quarterback, here's the thing. You're drafting at 28. What kind of quarterback do you think you're going to get? Do you think you're going to get Lamar Jackson at that point? Because that's what Lamar fell down to, 32, and the Ravens moved up into the back half of that first round to grab him there. Again, I already told you, I think Jared Goff and Lamar Jackson are very similar. Just one is black and one can run. Jared Goff is white and he cannot. That's kind of it. You seem to, if you really want to hone in on what the issue is here, they both seem to have these bigger problems in these bigger games, right? I don't know if Lamar Jackson will ever get to a Super Bowl. Jared Goff at least has been in a Super Bowl, and that Super Bowl was really, really close. And in that Super Bowl, you went up against arguably the greatest quarterback of all time and arguably the greatest head coach of all time. So I don't know. I tend to lead towards Jared Goff and his inability to run in his baby hands. I'm cool with it. I think you can win with him. Again, my big issue is moving forward, right? The one thing that this game told me about that has to be fixed. Has to be fixed. This was the one thing I was screaming at my wife about, and I ended up waking my baby up, and she was not happy with me. The one thing that has to be fixed, you need to retool your offensive line. Your offensive line is a bit of a mess. Everybody wants to talk about this offensive line like it's some second coming of Christ. This offensive line hasn't been what it was supposed to be, I think, ever. I'm tired of watching Taylor Decker get blown by. Taylor Decker is washed. You need to either move him to a reserve role or he needs to retire. You don't need Taylor Decker out there. And I think if you do that, Penei Sewell needs to flip over to your left side. He needs to now be your left tackle. Graham Glasgow, he is sufficient enough. Okay, he's okay, but he is more suited and more comfortable being a right guard instead of a left guard. You got away with it for most of the season, but I think you see some of the holes there. Zeitler, look, was a 1-year deal. I'm not sure what you're going to do. He's a little bit older. His passing grade was good, but again, I think you need to strengthen the inside of that offensive line. And then you look at Frank Ragnow. He's long in the tooth. Like, what are you doing? This guy basically goes out there and he's got a nub for a foot because his ankle's so damn bad. You have to retool this offensive line. It is not as good as you think it is. Now, look, Christian Mahogany, I think he's going to be fine. I think he's come out of nowhere, and he's been what they want him to be. I wasn't expecting this from him. So I think you'll be okay with Mahogany, but you need to add more pieces on this offensive line. You need to make that better. A better offensive line means a better Jared Goff. Better Jared Goff means you're winning these big games. Also means a better run game for you. Now you look at your defense, and I think that's where large parts of this game were kind of lost. You end up losing a guy like Aiden Hutchinson. You end up losing a guy like Aleem McNeil. You go out in the offseason, or you go out in the middle of the season, and you pick up Zadarius Smith. Zadarius Smith, for the most part, was kind of a net zero, maybe a net one. Like, he had a play or two when he came here. To me, very underwhelming. Now, the thing that I do like is pairing him with Aiden Hutchinson. I think that maybe makes him a better player, but he is, to me, the baseline of what you want from a D end. And for the most part, I feel like he's a rotational guy. He just his motor isn't all that high, whereas you see a guy like Aiden Hutchinson who is just 110% all the time. Just go, 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 go. Zadarius Smith's kind of a one-trick pony, and if he gets there, he gets there, and if he doesn't, you just hope he doesn't get beat. You need to add another defensive end, and I think you need to add another impactful defensive tackle. Aleem McNeil going down, when that happened, really and truly, it crippled you. Because that was the guy who was holding that defensive line together. It was really Aiden Hutchinson and Aleem McNeil. You lose Aiden, you're able to kind of piece things together a little bit. When you lose Aleem, all of a sudden, everybody's got to start carrying more water, and some of these guys can't carry that weight. You need to add another impactful defensive tackle, and you need to add another impactful defensive end. You need another edge rusher, somebody who can get to the quarterback. I'm not saying the same as Aiden Hutchinson, but somebody who can do some of that dirty work. If you ever end up in this situation again where you lose your two best defensive linemen, you need to have guys who can help step up and carry that water. DJ Reader, I was completely underwhelmed by his performance this year. This was a guy who we were looking to really help take some of that pressure off of Aleem McNeil. Levi Onwuzurike, he's been on the side of a milk carton for weeks. I haven't seen that guy. And the sad thing is, it's a contract year for him. So, yeah, you started the season pretty good, but as the season wore on, where you been? What happened? Where you at? Josh Paschal, another guy who I haven't really seen enough from, taking silly penalties. There aren't enough quality pieces. You need game changers. We talk about sometimes bringing in a guy who's got a bit of a bad attitude and is sometimes a bad dude, but they can take over football games. We've talked about that for a long time. You need a guy like that. You need another one. Aiden Hutchinson, on one hand, is a good guy, has a great attitude, and he's a game changer. Like, you love guys like that. Those guys are kind of unicorns. You don't find them all the time. So if you can go find one of those guys, get another one, sure. But they don't fall off trees. Sometimes you got to bring in one of those bad guys, a guy who's slightly disgruntled, and let him go out there and try to wreak havoc and take over ball games for you. You need at least one more of those guys. And like I said, secondary, those guys just seem to get hurt all the damn time. Amik Robertson going down, I think, was critical in this game. And again, that is a guy who, when he heals up, I would love for them to go back out and bring him back in, because I think he showed you something, and I think he can be a big part of what you're trying to do with that secondary. Coming out of this game, this loss, I know it stings. What does this team have to improve on for next season? Mine is offensive and defensive line. I think those two areas can and should be the strength of this team, and I think they need to be fixed. What do you think needs to be tweaked or adjusted to help get this team over the hump? Last year, kind of came out of nowhere, got to the NFC Championship game. You were a couple of plays away from playing in a Super Bowl. This year, it was Super Bowl or bust, and you busted your very first football game, and it was against the 6-seeded Commanders with a young upstart rookie. So I think this game right here hurts a little bit more and is a little bit more telling for what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell are going to have to do to help get you to that Super Bowl to win it. So what do you think has to be done?
Yeah, no doubt. I think that your ideas are the home run A+ right away look at. And then to me, it's going to be incumbent upon the organizational shift that in coaching that's going to happen, and we're going to touch on that in just a few moments. But to me, it's going to be, the next offensive coordinator's got to realize that 3rd down and 1 doesn't mean you have to be aggressive on 3rd down to pass the ball. It means that if you're going to go for it on 4th down already, just run the ball. I mean, you have Jahmyr Gibbs, so I think the organizational shift has to be to put the ball in his hands. And you can potentially have one of the best running backs in the NFL. And I thought that it was egregious to start the game with David Montgomery. I thought it's egregious that he had less than 20 touches. It's egregious. Absolutely one of the biggest reasons. Jahmyr Gibbs is a Ferrari. And unfortunately, you got to have the tough conversation with David Montgomery. You're taking a back seat, bro. Like, you're a short yardage guy. You're going to get 8 to 10 carries a game, and Jahmyr's getting 20. And we let him ride, and we build an offensive line that suits Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, absolutely, he's a Ferrari. He's somebody that can lead the league in touchdowns, yards after the catch, explosiveness. He's got it all. He's got all the tools. I expect that to happen. And then the other thing outside of on the field is that medical training personnel staff has to be overhauled. Like, that was not elite. A lot of the injuries were football related, but a lot of them were MCL injuries. A lot of them were probably due to some things that I think, yes, there's football reasons for it. Yes, a lot of them happened in the course of the playing field. But when you have 20 guys on IR, cuz that's an outlier. That's something going on in training that can be enhanced. And I know Dan's standing up for everybody, says, well, we did the same thing and nobody got hurt last year. But unfortunately, football takes its toll, and Dan Campbell runs tough practices. So maybe the practice schedule changes a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit different in regards to some preservation for the players. Maybe that's what it took to win 15 games, but maybe you just take a step back and you go 11-6 and you grind it out. You figure you got to have advancements where you can't have it where 20 guys end up on IR. Something's got to be looked at in that sense. But I think organizationally, I'm curious now. I know the window's open, and I know that people are going to talk about it, and we'll talk about the Super Bowl window at the end. But it takes a hit. When you lose Ben Johnson, the NFL world is coming a calling like sharks, like a bunch of hawks to pick at what's left over. It's like the carcass just immediately showed up, and then all the NFL world is like, boom, let's go after Johnson, Glenn, Hank Fraley. The assistants are going to be looked at. It's wild how fast it moves and how money can just, shift everybody. But here's the thing, guys. I want you guys to know, I know Dan gives off the emotional guy and things like that, but he knew. He knows already. Like, he said it in public. Like, I have meetings with these guys to prep them for scenarios to learn. So you think he just did that willy-nilly just for the hell of it? He developed his guys to make more money. He's the ultimate, really pure, joyous individual that's selfless. Like, he knew. He did meetings, but at the same time, he knows what they think. So he also gains from it too. So he knows what Ben Johnson thinks on this situation because he's had those talks. Like, guys, come on. Dan Campbell is a guy that understands his position, but he does got to get better. He does in game have to be more of a master. Like, it's too willy-nilly, but I do think that you can tell by the time Friday hits in his media session, like early on, Monday he's grinding, Wednesday he's really on point talking, and on the radio he's great, but by Friday he's like this frenetic, hyper coffee dude that's probably wore out. And I think that it affects his coaching. It affects in-game. I think everybody was wore out by everything that they had to do to grind and everything like that. So Dan Campbell has to be better as a coach. But I think that everybody panicking about Glenn and Johnson leaving, guys, I know everybody thinks worse, but why not get better? There's a chance, and it's probably a long shot, but there's a chance Robert Saleh could come here. There's a chance the training that Tanner Engstrand or Scotty Montgomery had will be enough. So when Ben Johnson left, my reaction was angry because you went to the division rival and you realized that, he was at some point having an opportunity to talk to other people. So I'm very curious to see your reaction to it because I'm upset that Ben Johnson left and I'm upset that all the noise was created. It doesn't foster full attention to detail, but it happens. And I do think that the result of Ben Johnson leaving is going to have an impact on the Lions offense. But I do think there's opportunity for growth to change some things because for some reason, Ben Johnson on third down just wanted to start doing some willy-nilly trick plays in the postseason. Mm-hmm. It's like, come on, bro. You're really going to call Jameson Williams to throw the fucking football? Like, in the end, there is a responsibility for J-Mo to fucking look at the field and see that zero's there and not throw it. But why put him in that position? Yep. Fucking just put the ball in Jameson Williams' hand and say, go, run. Yep. Hey, go hump the end zone. Remember you did that? Go do that again. Like, I don't need Jameson Williams pretending to be Jared Goff. I don't need Jameson Williams throwing the football in a critical moment when you're still in the game. So I think there's opportunities to get better with your coordinators and to not be so crazy at the dumbest times. And I think Dan Campbell protected Ben Johnson. I asked Dan Campbell directly, why aren't you running the ball? And I think, he shows support by saying, I hear you, I understand what you're saying, but we like the matchup and we were going to go for it on fourth down. But guess what? The end result is anytime you drop back to pass, Goff can drop the football or throw an interception. So there's no guarantee that you assume that fourth down is going to happen if you make a mistake on third down. So fucking run the football and just run the football behind the offensive line that you built. So my reaction is, fuck the Bears. They stole Ben Johnson. He's smart. And look, cuz, you know how we made it? Chicago Bear fans are now in our mentions, loving life and talking shit to us. Chicago sports fan on Twitter gets in. He's like, to my tweet on Twitter at Detroit Podcast, he says, and he writes to Detroit Sports Podcast, one day Lions fans will all admit their quarterback wasn't good enough to lead them to where they wanted to go. Don't blame Ben Johnson. He gave all that he had at excellence. It just wasn't enough. He desperately needs a unique quarterback, bottom line. Ben wants greatness. He has that desire. So the Bears fans are puffing their chest, making it known that, hey, Ben chose us. Ben chose to look at the pick of the litter. Chose, not to go to Washington. Chose the Bears and Ryan Poles and Caleb Williams. So that's what we're left with. And good for you, Bears fans. You got your guy. You paid him $13 million or so a year. I get you. But you know what? Guess what, guys? Dan knows the ins and outs of Ben Johnson more than anybody. And so Dan Campbell's going to have his gears grinding, and it's not going to be as devastating as everybody thinks. I think the Lions Super Bowl window is still open, but at the same token, I don't see number one seed, home field advantage. I see a grinding football team that gets back to its roots and gets hungry after this loss. But what did you think of the whole Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn situation? Do you know, the fan base is like really hitting the conspiracy theory, like, oh, they didn't prepare and all that. But you guys factually, you know, I know I don't want to let facts get in the way of a good story, but factually, when they did virtual interviews, the Lions did not know who their opponent was. It was virtual. So, and guys, I know there are a lot of hours, okay? And even the Commanders are having interviews and stuff like that. They're like, a day is 18 hours long. He's not allowed to have an hour of personal time to talk to another team. He's not allowed an hour to text his family. He's not allowed an hour to get a couple messages with his agent. Like, you guys, like, I want you to realize, okay, Adam has a lot on his plate with a new young family. I've raised my kids. They're a little bit older now. But in a 18-hour day, you can get a shit ton done in the day. I promise you. You can do a podcast. You can edit a podcast. You can upload a podcast. You can write 10 stories. You can talk to people. You can see 5 clients. You can do a lot of things in one day. Now, does it take, do you want to make the argument, sole focus to win? You can make that argument. But at the same token, there's no other, the other side, the Commanders are in the same boat. Like, sometimes you just have to accept that, look, that's the NFL world. You know, he's going to go from 2 million to 13 million. Get the fuck out of here. Everybody's going to want to do it. So I'm mad out of respect that an offensive mind that helped the quarterback is not here. Respectfully. Like, I don't want him to win. I want him to get fired. I will celebrate when he loses. I will celebrate when he gets fired. That's just sports. So it doesn't make me, it does not make me uncouth to act that way. It does not make me an uncouth trash head, as some lovely ladies got in and messaged us yesterday. I am not uncouth at times. I am a sports fan. And as a sports fan, I root for home team and home team only. So pro Lions, fuck the Bears. I hope they lose. I hope Ben Johnson ruins Caleb Williams. As of now, here's my opinion. Ben Johnson's dead to me, respectfully. And that's the way it is. That's the way sports fans are supposed to act. And good on you, Detroit. Look, it's not disrespectful. When he was here, we supported him. We supported the crazy shit he was doing. Now he's not here. Now he's with the enemy. Now he wants to fuck up your dreams. So see you later, alligator. Out of sight, out of mind. Fuck Ben Johnson, respectfully. And hopefully he does everything that he needs to do for him. But we care about Detroit. And I love the provincial nature of Detroit. And I love the fact that we rally around the athletes and the sports fans do their thing. But it's all out of respect. You don't act that way if you didn't respect the guy that left. And good on the coaches. They did their thing. But what's your reaction? Is this the end of the era?
I think the window is starting to close. Let's start there. I think the window is starting to close. And I think you keep getting to this point, and you kind of keep getting punched in the nuts so many times, it starts to kind of take a toll on you, right? And you start to question some of the stuff you do and some of the things you're doing. And then what happens is what got you there is now starting to evolve. And what you built yourself and your foundation on is starting to kind of change a little bit because, again, you're second guessing everything. Like, oh, well, this isn't working, so we've got to try to do this. So I think that window is starting to close. You losing these two coordinators, right? We're all expecting Aaron Glenn to get mentioned that he's either going to the Jets or he's going to the Saints. I think he probably ends up at the Saints. It's probably a better spot than the Jets. Jets are a mess. But you start to lose your coordinators who helped get you there and who were part of that fabric and part of that foundation and part of that culture. Those guys leave. Now it's back on Dan Campbell. Look, I think Dan Campbell will do a good enough job of bringing in whoever he wants to bring in, whoever he feels will help fix whatever some of these issues are, okay? I think he will do a good enough job bringing in those next set of coordinators, and I think he'll be fine, all right? I think they'll be okay with that, but you keep adding years on guys, and the thing about working in a salary cap is the salary cap starts to get tight, so now you start to lose guys. We all like Ife Melifonwu, right? He might not be back next year. And he's a guy who's an important piece when he's healthy and he's playing. You start looking up and down this roster and you're like, well, this guy might not be back. This guy might not be back. And you start to lose some of these guys. Now, yes, your core is still intact, and that is good. But I think that window starts to get smaller because you just can't hit the reset button, and guys just can't go back to 2024. You know what I'm saying? So I do think the window's starting to close a little bit. Ben Johnson leaving to go to the Bears was a complete kick in the dick. And to me, money's a crazy thing, right? Money is a motherfucker. It'll make you do some weird shit. Because if you go back to a year ago, Ben Johnson basically turned down the Washington Commanders, who have, in my estimation, a way better quarterback than the Bears do, and also seem to have revamped and have a new lease on life with what is going on with their front office and their new ownership group, right? Ben Johnson's whole thing was you need to the ownership and the front office and the coaching staff all need to be on the same page, which you haven't seen that with the Bears, and I can't tell you how long. And word on the street is the Bears general manager and the front office of Chicago was kind of iffy on Ben Johnson. Also, ownership they're very much like Mr. Ford used to be, one of those loyal owners that probably too loyal to a fault and kind of get in the way a little bit because of the way that they conduct themselves. It is a lineage business where their claim to fame is basically owning the company. They haven't really done anything else. So it becomes a little bit messy and murky when you've got families like that. Now, luckily for the Lions, Sheila's been able to figure things out and get things fixed from her father. Okay. I think her mother kind of showed her a little bit of the way, because I think when Martha came in, it was a breath of fresh air because she had a little bit of grit to her and she put a little boot in some asses. But with Chicago's front office and their ownership, not great. Ben Johnson said it needs to all be good. You need to account for your sins and you need to tell me what you did wrong and how you're going to fix it. I don't know if Chicago did that, but I'll tell you what, $13 million makes me want to go sign and work for Chicago. Look, I was totally put off that he went to the Bears because he could have went anywhere else. Anywhere else. He went to the Bears. Obviously, they paid him a ton of money. I was going to be upset if Ben Johnson left anyways, but staying in the division makes it extra salty, makes it hurt extra. It's like pouring salt in the wound because now I got to see you twice. And yes, he's got a young quarterback. And yes, that roster, you look at that roster on paper, I do feel like it's a very talented roster. I just feel like there are so many things that are wrong on the periphery with it. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, the general manager, the front office, it's a weird mix to me. You add Ben Johnson to it, we'll see what happens. But like you said, I hope Ben Johnson gets fired in 2 years. I hope Ben Johnson gets fired in 3 years. I hope Ben Johnson loses his job sooner than later. I hope Ben Johnson is the hottest offensive coordinator in 2027. You know? I hope things go horribly awry in Chicago and he is looking for a job. And if you want, maybe you come back to Detroit. Maybe you don't. I don't know. I hope things go horrible for him because it's Chicago. If you could drop a meteor shower on the city by the lake, go ahead. Do it. Drop a meteor shower on Chicago. Blow up Soldier Field. I don't give a shit. Put Ben Johnson in the middle of it. I don't give a shit. You are now the enemy, and you are now enemy number one. So see ya. And that's just kind of where I'm at. Like it was because of the team. You knew he was going, and I had made peace with him going, and it was going to hurt no matter what. But because of the team that he went to, it hurt even more, and it was almost like getting spit in your face.
Yeah, man, it's tough because, like we said, we all thought that this group could win together, but again, I think the internal, external candidates that are going to be brought in will help the Detroit Lions. I do think that, Aaron Glenn, I do think is going to end up with the Jets. I think that they're setting up potentially to land Lance Newmark from the Commanders, so that will set up the alignment. Remember, too, they interviewed Chris Spielman. That wasn't an interview for him to be GM. That was hey, Rick Spielman's there. He's like, okay, if we put this together, what does it look like? He consulted. So Chris Spielman, in the end, helped his brother do him a solid and said, okay, how would you put this together? And he'd be like, Lance is great. So clearly the Jets asked, okay, what do you think about Lance? Oh, Lance is great. What do you think about Aaron? Aaron's great. So that is great from Chris Spielman. The Lions credit to the Jets for the way in which they did it, and so they're using the Lions plan. So that would behoove them to do that. And for Aaron Glenn, it's all about your quarterback. You got to figure it out. If you fuck up, you get 3 years and you're out. So it's the biggest decision that any head coach has got to make is the quarterback. And that's why Ben Johnson went to Caleb. He saw, which was funny because I asked, and he knew, he lied. I know he lied to me. He said, I didn't look deeply at all Caleb's throws. Yeah, get the hell out of here. You didn't look at Caleb Williams. Get the hell out of here. You know every quarterback and what they're about, what they bring to the table. And that was a funny question by me, which it went national. I didn't know, like I was getting all this buzz at Detroit Podcast. I didn't know what the hell was going on. And then I realized that Chicago aired my question. And it was funny. It had the intended consequence to get buzz in Detroit, but it actually got buzz in Chicago, which was funny because those people were crazy. And it ended up, you got your guy. So it's fun. It's a lot more. It's fun for us because those two games are going to be fucking amazing to cover as the two guys, the mentor and the student, the mentor student against the teacher. It's going to be fun. But for the Detroit Lions, I think it's much tougher because, look, we got to be honest. I do think Dan Campbell was straight. He thought that they were going to win the Super Bowl last year. And this year, I mean, come on, guys. There's 20 guys on IR. So my ceiling this year was Super Bowl loss because I know it's coming. Like my body's already prepared for it. Like I know I'm going to watch. I'm going to be probably next year in SoFi, have to spend a shit ton of money to get there, work my ass off, do everything possible to cover the team top to bottom to do the job, and then they're going to lose. So I think now this year helped prepare a little bit, but that's the life of a Lions fan, right? And it's more of the same. It gives us the wide range of emotion to support the team. But man, this was a collapse. And unfortunately, once Amik went down, I think everybody knew. I mean, they could have won that game. So to me, to conclude this week, I think it's fair to say that, you know what? If you're going to go out like that, go out now, as opposed to scraping past the Commanders then to get your ass waxed by the Eagles. That's what would have happened. So what are you going to do? You're going to try to go out there and stop the Eagles' offense with one cornerback on the whole roster that has, and he's a rookie? I mean, come on. It was going to be a tall task. And then go and ask to beat the Chiefs or the Bills? I mean, because once Amik went down, you could close the chapter on the season. And let's get to the next one. More talent, the draft, free agency. The football team will be rebuilt, and I think organizationally, philosophy, just a couple changes. Run the ball on 3rd and 1, little bit just, guys, Dan Campbell can be aggressive. Just dial it down from 105% down to 80. Like, you can still go for it. You can still do those things. But on 3rd and 1, run the ball. It's pretty simple, straightforward. Like, run the ball right side. I can do that. Panay, do your thing. Panay will get you a yard. Or, hey, how about you implement the, hey, which one of you guys likes Jared Goff's ass? All right, you push him. All right, you do it. 3rd and 1, you can't do 2 tush pushes. All right, Panay, line up as a fullback. You fucking push Jared Goff into the moon. Simple shit, man. Simple shit. Nope, not us. 3rd and 1, let's throw the ball, and it's a fumble, and we get that shit. It's just more of the same for the Lions. That's what we're used to. And unfortunately, this year went that way. I'll ask you, cuz, 2 quick questions, your brief answer. Was this season a failure? Was it a waste?
Yeah. The goal was Super Bowl. And it was not even so much winning the Super Bowl. I think the expectation was there to win it, but it was to get at least to the Super Bowl. You came up short. You went 15-2, and what did it get you? It got you nothing. It got you a first flight ticket out of the playoffs, and that's where we are. So yes, in my estimation, this season was a complete failure, and it was a waste. Now, you can find some silver linings in the season. I think what Dan Campbell was able to do with a completely depleted team is very encouraging and shows his coaching chops. I think what this team was able to do to get to 15-2, being as banged up as they were and basically having to constantly fix things on the fly, shows you that you've got the right guy in place in Dan Campbell. Now, you've got to be able to either A, stay healthy, or B, put it all together and get yourself to that Super Bowl. But yeah, man, the goal was the Super Bowl. And did you come away with the Super Bowl? Did you come away with a Super Bowl appearance? And the answer is no. So in my estimation, season's a failure.
Failure. That's the byproduct of expectation. And then I'll ask you this. If you could ask, this is going to drop the morning, probably just before Brad Holmes talks, Thursday morning. What would you ask Brad Holmes if you have one question to ask Brad Holmes this week?
That's a good question. And he has to answer it?
Yeah, he'll answer it, or just something that sparked your curiosity through the year, or the Flame Out, or Dan, or Jared.
Okay.
What would you ask Brad Holmes? Because I think I'm going to ask about the like you had a couple developmental guys, and you didn't take advantage of draft picks, and you with all the injuries, you may have taken advantage of having some more draft picks. Do you still think that that's going to be a strategy moving forward, is to take guys and basically redshirt them?
That's a good question.
Because you could have had you got nothing from Broderick Martin, you got nothing from Giovanni Manu. That's 2 players. Those spots are coveted, bro, and that's I would be shocked if he keeps doing that.
Yeah, for sure. I would ask what he feels. This kind of goes back to the question that we had earlier. I would ask him what he feels needs to be addressed the most. What one specific
Unit or area,
position or unit, yes, needs to be addressed the most.
Yep. And that's fair, because he does tend to enter that like, well, we always look at everything, but I would think that he's always going to say in the trenches too, because it's clear this year it's the edge rusher, man. You gotta bring some interesting stuff for Aiden Hutchinson. So, because it was good to talk for the hour, I feel a little bit better, but it doesn't take away the sting of it's over. You were in it, you were in the dance, and it's over. And it was not meant to be for the 2024 Detroit Lions. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Thank you for your hilarious responses. I really appreciate all of you guys. And the blessing is, yeah, you're going to have people that just have disdain for how we ask questions or what we do. And I know we've spawned like 15 people that do the same thing now. It's kind of crazy to see others doing the same kind of model that we did. It's unbelievable, but they just use cool graphics to add to their tweets. But it's just funny to see some people that have a lot of great sports questions doing the same things that we did. It's humbling. And it's also humbling, too, that people get our jokes. A lady messaged yesterday. She said, quit playing with our jokes, and I retweeted her. It was great because you get it. I said, oh, no, do you judge me for being uncouth? I do have a civilized side, too, other than this nonsense that you see on Twitter, and she was funny. So it's always fun with you guys, is because you guys are the wildest of the wild, but you're also classy and funny, and you bring a smile to our face, and that's why we love engaging with you guys. That's why we fire up 3, 4, 5 podcasts every single week on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Look, tough times are ahead. But as Adam and I know, tough times don't last, and tough people do. Doc and Jock will be back for episode 600 next week. And let's see what we bring to the table to celebrate a truly amazing milestone. See everybody next week.
You fucking podcasters. I said don't let them in here.